Welcome to Equity Builds Expertise, the podcast. Because whether you teach it or build it, expertise grows where equity leads. I'm Shana Buckner, STEM educator, consultant, author, and the voice behind the Equity Builds Expertise framework. And after years of helping teachers, school leaders, engineers, and technical teams grow their people, I've learned something pretty simple. And that's that classrooms and companies really face some of the same challenges. And it's going to be the same solutions that change everything. So here, we're going to talk about what really builds expertise. We're talking about belonging, access, agency, clarity, communication, and those everyday decisions that actually shape how people think, learn, and collaborate. So if you're committed to growing your people, whether we're talking about students or staff, teachers or engineers, then this is the space for you. So pull up a chair, grab your notebook, and join me as we bridge the worlds between STEM education and STEM industry and build the expertise that truly lasts. This is Equity Builds Expertise, the podcast. Let's get started. So imagine finding out that your child's trajectory, whether or not they'll have an opportunity to take AP Calculus as a high school senior, was entirely decided when they were just 10 years old. So this is a real experience that has happened, and in my district, at the end of 5th grade, students take a placement test to determine their middle school math track. But there's a catch. The test actually covers 6th grade concepts. So the only way a 10-year-old can be successful on a test covering material that they haven't been taught yet is if they are already ahead. So who does well? It's those students whose families had resources to put them in tutoring programs and tutoring opportunities like Kumon or Huntington. And we call it an assessment of ability, but really it's an assessment of access. Welcome to Equity Builds Expertise, the podcast, because whether you teach it or build it, expertise grows where equity leads. I'm your host, Shana Buckner, and today we're taking a hard look in the mirror. We are dismantling the myth of the math person, and hopefully in doing so, we'll be exposing the hidden gatekeeping that happens in our schools, and we'll be talking about how we systematically push brilliant minds out of STEM. All right, so let's talk about this weed out culture in STEM that we have. How many times have you heard a student actually say, or even an adult say, I'm not a math person, or I'm not a science person? We treat these subjects like they are personality traits instead of skills that you can actually practice. So listen, it is perfectly fine to not like math, but it's actually a lie to say that you aren't capable of doing it. Yet as educators, we sometimes feed into this, and I know I did at some point too. Right? There's a STEM superiority complex that we may have. And I know a lot of the science teachers who believe chemistry is supposed to be the hardest science and If you can't keep up, then you just aren't cut out for it. That's a mentality. And some teachers even boast about using the first month of school to weed out students so that they'll drop the class. But let's get real. When you weed out kids in September, you aren't measuring their intelligence. You're measuring their privilege. You're measuring their prior exposure. All right, so we need to really look at how implicit biases and arbitrary unwritten rules act as gatekeepers that then deny students access to advanced coursework. And I'm going to share a very personal story about this because it is super important. So, when my twins were in ninth grade, they were both taking honors biology. And my daughter knew exactly what she wanted. At that time, she wanted to go into STEM, maybe medical school or nursing. And she had ended the year with a very high A average. She crushed it. But when it came time for recommendations for the next year, her teacher did not recommend her for honors chemistry. Why? And it was because the teacher actually believed that there was a rule that said in order to take honors chemistry, you had to have been in this advanced Algebra 2 trigonometry class. But that actually wasn't a real requirement. It was an arbitrary gatekeeping practice. Meanwhile, my son, who is in a different honors biology class, he basically kind of stumbled his way through the course. He did end with a B, but his teacher said that she would have recommended him for honors chemistry if that's something that he wanted to do and wanted to take the class. So here we have two kids growing up in the same house, both taking the same math. One had a 98 or a high A average, and the other had a B. And the boy would have been recommended just for asking. The girl gets held back because of a math requirement that was perceived but not necessarily accurate. Now, thankfully, the district does allow for parent advocacy around coursework, although they don't recommend it, right? But they both have parents that are able to override those decisions. And when I spoke to my daughter's teacher to tell her that I was going to override the placement, the teacher actually said to me, "Oh, I didn't know your daughter was interested in STEM." That is exactly how gatekeeping works. If I didn't know the system or if I wasn't comfortable pushing back, my daughter's STEM trajectory would have been derailed before she even turned 16. These barriers have a massive cost. I was mostly a B student in science, to be honest, but I definitely remember I got a C in chemistry. I went to college wanting to be a science major, but I was terrified, absolutely terrified. I was too afraid to push myself through chemistry and physics because I didn't truly believe I could do it. I, first of all, didn't see any Black scientists or doctors or engineers, and I certainly didn't learn about any when I was in school. So I defaulted to doing what was easiest for me, which at the time was English and writing. That lack of self-efficacy changes lives. My daughter made this bracelet years ago for me, and I wear it all the time. It has a simple motto, and it says, "Do it afraid." Do it afraid. It means it is absolutely okay to be terrified of the challenge in front of you, but you cannot let that fear make you immobile. You have to keep moving forward. But as educators, we have to also create the environments where students feel safe enough to do it afraid. We cannot grade students solely on compliance or speed. If a student skips a question on a test because they ran out of time, a 0 for that question or 0 points for that question doesn't tell you anything about their actual content knowledge. And homework should be practice. You can get a 0 for not turning it in and destroy your grade, or get a 100 for finishing it completely wrong and inflate your grade. When the twins were getting their driving permits, they spent a whole year practicing. Listen, they scratched my car. They're dents, they're phantom dents that no one wants to admit to of creating. But the reality is, they didn't walk into their final driving test with a negative score because the mistakes that they made during their practice year. We need to give our students that same sort of grace. Give them flexible pathways like retests so that grades reflect true mastery, not just compliance. All right. So we cannot keep blaming the pipeline problem for the lack of diversity in STEM when our own classroom structures and unwritten rules are the ones that are actually closing those valves. Here is your homework. I want you to just look closely at your own prerequisites, your rubrics, or even your hiring qualifications, and ask yourself, am I measuring true capability, or am I just measuring who had a head start? All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Please make sure that you subscribe and rate the podcast. And I don't want you to miss out on the next episode. I will be sitting down with the incredible Dr. Pamela Seda to talk about uncovering the brilliance in every math learner. So have a wonderful week. Until the next time, remember that expertise grows where equity leads. Let's get to work.